Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another fantastic episode on the Unleashing Potentials podcast. I'm your host, Bernadette. Joining me today is Spencer Combs. How are you?
I am doing well. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. How do I pronounce your last name?
Combs, just like it
Combs?
sounds and looks. Yep.
Okay, awesome. So,
Uh,
Spencer, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
but I was going to say Combs. Unfortunately, I don't need one, but here we are.
That's funny. Where about are you tuning in from?
I'm actually in Jacksonville, Florida.
Oh, that's awesome. You have a bit of an accent. I'm in Canada. I don't know the different states and US accents. Tell us more.
Okay, so that most of the time when I tell people say, "Well, where are you from?" Right? The country ass accent that you're hearing is from my extended period of time in my life that I spent in South Carolina, which is
Oh,
not about well,
yeah.
middle of it is about 4 hours from me.
Okay.
And then I was born in Naples, Italy. My mother's side of the family is all Italian. So I'm Southern by Italian and I'm Southern by the American roots. So either way, I just come across as really country. That's what the accent is here.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Yeah. I see you're having your coffee or tea there.
It is tea
Oh, yeah.
today.
I have tea too.
Here we go.
Yeah,
We should just call this tea time.
definitely. I'm ready to
Spill the
go.
tea.
Yeah. Spencer, tell us more about you. What do you do and how do you do it?
Well, I believe that professional development always happens on the backside of personal development. You will hear me say that almost every time I get started anywhere. And at this point now, I basically work with business leaders in various uh, arenas, if you will. A lot of them usually are in real estate or mortgages or insurance. I've worked with everyone from trauma victims to uh, Army colonels transitioning into into a civilian life. There's a lot of variance there, but really at the end of the day, it's about helping business leaders fast track what we call unshakable profit,
Mhm.
productivity, and purpose. And we do that through, you know, online workshops. We do them through live workshops. I have a 3-day weekend event that I do. We got one in November coming here in Jacksonville, Florida. Um, we just put out a new book, right?
Oh, nice.
Um, so there's a lot of different things that we do. You can find
Mhm.
all that out at spencercombs.com.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing. What were you doing before you got into the work that you're doing right now?
So in the late 90s, last century,
Mhm.
that makes me old. I have three daughters, by the
I'm a
way.
90s baby.
Oh, well, I'm a 70s baby, so that makes me really old right now. So I have three daughters, by the way, and the youngest is 23. So I got 23, 25, and 27-year-old. The 27-year-old has already given me one grandchild, and I got another one on the way from her. Finally getting a boy, by the way.
Oh,
So,
nice.
but if I rewind the clock all the way back to mid 90s, I got a GED. Right. And today now, I'm advising $20 million insurance agencies. It's like this guy got a GED. Yeah, I got a GED because of a lot of interesting factors, which we can get into if you want to. But the
Mhm.
when I came out of that, I then went to a Bible college, and Bible college, uh, it was a very legalistic type situation. And so luckily, over the years, I've come out of all of that, but went to Bible college. And then I was struggling to find my way through in terms of making an income. Eventually, I found the world of real estate
Mhm.
in 99. And in 99, I did really well all the way up until about 2004, 2005. Then dealt with the whole divorce situation. I had epilepsy, had all these other things happening along the way. And people started coming to me about how did you do all this? How did you make all this growth? Because it seems like overall, and I usually say this in lots of large events,
Mhm.
I'm known for two things. I'm known for optimizing whatever situation we're in, and the other is always moving forward regardless of the circumstances. And so that's how I got into the coaching space, if you will.
Mhm.
Um, but prior to that, it was real estate and so on.
Oh, nice. So yeah, you've been in some places and have had experiences. That's really cool from Bible school to what you're doing now. Where do you
Mhm.
get the strength that you're speaking to us with? There's something there. I'm trying to figure it out. You're a go-getter, you're very strong, you do what needs to be done. Where is that coming from? Who inspired you?
That's a question I've not been asked on a podcast. So the who, I think, is probably more than one person. I can't really tell you that it would be one individual. I do know that there were certain people along the way that created either guides or acted as guides or introduced me to certain things, right? So, like for instance, the person that helped me get into real estate was one of my mother's previous partners, and she introduced me the into the personal development space. Even though she was doing well in real estate, she introduced me to, Zig Ziglar and Tony Robbins and Brian Tracy and all these guys. And so um, she would be obviously one, right? That would be Darlene. And then there was others that were there when I could see the potential in me. And so they um, fed me, if you will. And then there's always been people along the way, but that energy and that intensity you're probably sensing from me is manufactured.
Mm.
People think that people are born with it. People say, well, I just don't have the level of self-will that you have, or I don't have. No, no, no. Let me tell you something. First of all, I'm an Enneagram 9. If you're familiar with Enneagram, are you familiar with Enneagram by chance?
No.
No, I don't want to put you on the spot. I'm sorry, but
Oh no, I love learning. Tell me more.
but Enneagram is an ancient, really, it's an ancient personality typing system.
Oh,
And anyone that knows Enneagram knows there's 9 numbers, and I'm a 9. And nines are typically known for being very their cardinal sin is sloth. I'm not the most I'm not naturally that way. And the truth is that I have manufactured it through understanding what I call the drift to drive framework that's in the book, right? The momentum. How do you get into this cell level of intensity? How do you tap into that with yourself, right? And so I would imagine the truth is that I've conditioned myself to become much more resilient, much more intensive. Anybody that knows me knows that I'm probably intense. They're thinking, "Oh, this guy's intense." I do my best not to be that way, but anyway,
mhm.
hopefully that answered your question.
Oh, yeah, I did. Yeah, I've heard of Enneagram. Sorry. It's too complex for me. I've been to the library a few times. I've picked one or two books about it and I returned them.
I'm gonna let me
Yeah.
give you a shortcut or simplicity with the whole thing.
Yes, please.
Enneagram, if you will just get the book by Ian Morgan Cron.
Okay.
It's called The Road Back to You. It is the most simplistic layout of the whole thing. I'll tell you what, I've done a lot of work on personality because in my work, obviously, I need to understand people. And
Mm.
plus, when you grew up with some very messed up people, you tend to become very calculated and wanting to learn other people's behavior because you don't understand why do they act the way they do. And so you get so curious about that kind of thing that you go off into these adventures and learning, right? And that may be true for you as well, knowing a little bit about you. But the for me, um, there's all these different things. The biggest ones out there in terms of personality typing are obviously going to be Myers-Briggs and DISC, DISC. Anything, by the way, anybody that does personality typing, there's any personality typing that's based on 4 types is based off DISC. So if you got 4 animals or 4 colors or 4 whatever, it's a DISC assessment. So DISC and MBTI. Well, Myers-Briggs and DISC to me have always been they've labeled you usually. And so it feels static. It's like, this is who I am and this is just what it's going to be.
Mhm.
What I appreciate about the Enneagram is that it shows you these are the behavioral tendencies when you're under stress, and these are the behavioral tendencies when you're feeling secure. And so it shows you how to actually make adjustments and changes and what you could do to become your best self. That's the reason why I appreciate the Enneagram more than the others, even though I'm very familiar with the others.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. It makes sense that way. Do you also, how do you deal with people? Uh, I don't get people most of the time, but I love people. I don't appreciate their actions or words. How do you do it?
So in neuro linguistic programming, NLP,
Hmm.
they have what's called beliefs of excellence, right? And one of them is that people do the best they can with the resources they have at hand.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
truth is that if somebody's being difficult or it's irrational behavior, they're doing what they can with what they've experienced or known. And
Hmm.
you think, well, that's not, but that doesn't make any sense. Well, the other fact is that another belief to understand is that people, every behavior is rooted in a positive intent.
Mm.
And so if we understand and we ask questions to figure out what's the positive intent behind this behavior, you'd say, well, that's ridiculous. What about people that do really horrible things? What's their positive intent? Well, those positive intents could be a sense of certainty
Mm.
or a sense of connection, or there's all these different things that it could be. And when we understand that, then we can make a decision, because in some cases we can actually help them with that. In other cases, we just let them hold on to it, because I say this in coaching all the time too. Whatever limitation you choose to fight for, you get to keep.
Mm. Oh, I love that. Can you say
So if you
that
want
again?
yeah, whatever limitation you choose to fight for, you get to keep.
Wow.
It's the truth is that if we're going to have a conversation and you're going to dig in and fight for your limitation because this is how it's always been, and you don't want to, you'd rather be right than happy,
Mm.
well then that's where I get to make a decision.
Yeah.
I can detach. I don't have to go down this path with you. This is why I can be completely malleable when it comes to political things, because you could be absolutely
Hmm.
opposed to everything that I would naturally believe,
Hmm.
but I don't necessarily look at you as a person differently. I just don't, but I don't necessarily have to play in the sandbox with you either.
Mm. Wow. I love that. Thank you for sharing. Tell us more about your book. What was the process writing it?
Mm. So writing the book originally, I I share for years, I've been sharing that there's really three critical factors to create success or move people forward. It's always been mechanics, mindset, and movement. All three of those. You got to have them all three, and they got to be there. Sounds very elementary, sounds basic. But the truth is that it's not so much those individual things as much as it is the relationship between those three things, right? And I always break it down in that order, with mechanics, then mindset, then movement, because that's been the path in my life. When I was young, as a young man, I wanted to do the mechanic. I wanted to understand, how does everything work and how do I become successful? And that's fine. But then eventually you get to the situation where you burn out or you just keep hitting a glass ceiling.
Mhm.
Well, then lucky for me, I had Darlene, as I just mentioned a minute ago, introduce me to mindset type materials. And so I went heavy into that, especially when I went through my divorce. And so then we have mechanics and mindset. Well, if you have mechanics and mindset, but you don't have movement, you're basically going to be stagnant. And so we have to add movement. And movement is where I got into high gear over the last 5 years or so. Um, so I was originally just going to start writing individual pieces of this entire framework, because
Mm.
there's a lot to it. And halfway through writing the first one, I decided, no, what I need to do is zoom out and write one book on the entire Unshakable framework. Um, Everything we do is unshakable, right? That's our branding. It's everything we do, because that's what you're sensing from me. That energy, that sense of, man, this guy's unshakable. That's what you're sensing.
Yeah.
It's the Unshakable Framework. And the truth is, the framework is a breakdown of drift to drive, which is all about getting momentum, creating it, moving it forward. And then what we call the Qualified Champions Framework, which is mastery. It's going from a purpose to progress. And there's 5 steps and all that. So with that being said, I backed up and just started all over again, writing the entire thing. And then now we will begin to break it all down. But literally, this just got into print like
Yeah.
last week.
Wow,
So
congratulations. That's
thank
awesome.
you. Thank
Mhm.
you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, how did you come up with the title?
I'm loving your questions, Bernadette.
You're welcome.
People don't ask these questions, but well, anybody that spends time with me, they start asking the right questions, they'll start finding out how intentional everything I do is. Momentum and mastery really got started because as I was working with individuals, I have well over 20,000 hours of one-on-one coaching at this point. I stopped counting after I got past 20, and that was back in 2014 or 15. So at this point, but through all these conversations and through the discussions I've been having, I had noticed a little pattern that many times people lean on one or the other naturally.
Mhm.
We all know people who are super, they take action, they go, they make things happen, and they can be very successful doing it that way, and they're very momentum minded. The challenge with that is if they're too momentum minded, then without the mastery, they could be the ones hitting a glass ceiling or getting frustrated in the process because they're shooting in the dark. They're doing everything off of sheer will. They're doing everything from an entrepreneurial standpoint. And what that does, of course, is cause people to what's required is mastery. They need systems and they need mindsets. They need pieces to help get them where they want to go, the mindset and the mechanics. And so, but some people are just naturally good at momentum. And so when I help people see that, then it's just a natural conversation to go into mastery and start moving everything forward.
Yeah.
Vice versa, though, which I think probably the majority of society as a whole, they're focused on mastery or they lean on mastery more than they do momentum. And what I mean by that is they want to maintain, they want to get it right, they want to get all the system right. Then they're nervous, and so they're trying to get it all right before they'll actually go take the appropriate actions or the highest level action necessary. And so they focus on mastery, and what they need is momentum. This is also true, by the way. That group, the mastery crowd, is going to be the ones that are maybe in the line of work or doing the business that they're doing because someone else had said this is probably what you should be doing. And so they just go down that path without actually ever considering what momentum would ask you is, what do you want? Why do you want it?
Yeah.
Who do you have to become? And then we talk about the how.
Hmm.
That's the syntax, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
What, why, who, how.
Thank you for sharing. I call those type of people sloth people. Let's talk about them. They know the direction, but they're not making any progress. And they also want what other people have, but those people put in the work. They're not willing to do it to get what other people get, but they try to slow down people in general so they can be at their level. What would you say, and what have you said to people like that?
Well, when you put these three words I just gave you, mechanics, mindset, and movement, you put them on a graph and you kind of like a Venn diagram, you know what the
Yeah,
bubbles are circle around each other.
yeah.
You'll end up with four patterns that show up.
Mm,
One of them is a frustrated pattern.
mm,
These are the people that have the mindset and they have movement. Like they have the mindset, but they're devoid of mechanics. And that's why they're frustrated. These are the people that I would refer to as so heavenly minded, they're no earthly good, right? They're consistently looking to, they have the beliefs and they see it and they got it, they own their stuff. They got the accountability to do all.
mhm,
For whatever reason, though, they won't slow down long enough to get into the mechanical part of this and get anywhere. So they stay frustrated, perpetually frustrated.
mhm.
The pattern I think you're referring to is the person who is heavily in the mechanics and missing the mindset, right?
Yeah,
When you're there, that's going to create a productivity type mindset, but it's the pattern overall, as long as they're taking action, is going to be one of burnout. It's going to be one of a rut, right? And
mm,
they're constantly hitting that glass ceiling because they can't mentally see it beyond where it's at right now,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you
right?
for sharing. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Let's talk about leadership. Again, it can be vast or we can narrow it down because there's so many different types of leadership. So many of them are crumbled and people are frustrated. In your experience, or opinion, what are some core values or ingredients that any leaders need to lead people or business?
All right. I think if you're going to ask me that question, it's going to be, let me just rip it right out of the book. Okay.
Okay.
First of all, I will say this about leadership. Who's a leader? This is a very common question, by the way, I get asked. Who would you consider a leader? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't think you're going to be able to actually lead other people until you first learn to lead yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So let's just take this to understand that the bottom line is when we're talking about a leader, in my perspective, it's anyone who's looking to defy the odds and go above the mediocrity and get into high performance. Okay. This is somebody who wants to lead themselves or lead others or move forward beyond the status quo, what I call the drift. Okay. So with that being said, they're going to need 4 core factors for momentum to create the energy to move them forward. And they're going to need 5 building blocks for mastery.
Mm-hmm.
Which one of those 2 do you want me to cover first?
You take the lead. Whichever
Okay.
one comes first for you. Go ahead.
Well, typically I have to start. I usually start people with the momentum side of the conversation because it really generates the energy necessary to move it forward. Because a lot of people think they need motivation. I will repeat quite often, you don't need motivation. What you need is emotional leverage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. So if you need emotional leverage, how do you create that? Well, there's 4 core factors. We're not going to spend all the time in the world on it, but I'm going to tell you it's in here. So you can go to momentumandmastery.com and download it.
Mm-hmm.
You can actually, if you buy it from me there rather than Amazon, I send you a digital version as well. So you have to wait until the book shows up. There's 4 core factors. 1, you got to dream.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many people get so stuck on the negative side of the battery, right? Batteries have positive and negative charges.
Mm-hmm.
If we're going to have the energy necessary on the positive side, you've got 2 factors, and that's dreaming is 1. The other is desire. You have to understand what you want and why you want it.
Mm-hmm.
And many times when I take people through that exercise, by the way, like we're talking about leadership, we're talking about helping people fast track the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
They don't really know what they want. And if they do know what they want, they didn't even know why they wanted it in the first place. But we can build a tremendous amount of desire if we have those things connected, right? So dreams, desires, and when you start getting into that desire and clarifying it, naturally you're going to start getting into the negative polarization of the battery, which is going to be number 3 is going to be disturbed. You got to get disturbed.
Mm-hmm.
People want to numb themselves. They don't want to get, this is where the emotional leverage comes in. There's different ways to do that. But at the end of the day, you have to get into the dark side of this conversation to get yourself moving. And so I just did one of my Spencer Uncensored episodes.
Mm-hmm.
That's over at unshakablegroup.com. I just did one on 10 ways to get into the dark side, right? 10 ways to tap into your disturbances to move you forward. But you got to have it. And then the 4th factor, it's also on the negative polarity, is decisions.
Mm-hmm.
You got to make decisions, right? And a true decision always is exemplified through an action, right?
Yeah.
It's a start-stop discussion, right? So people say, well, it doesn't always mean a start, an outward thing that you're putting energy into. Maybe it's something you're stopping. That's true too. It's a decision. But anytime you stop doing something, it's usually because you're going to start doing something else, right? I'm going to stop doom scrolling so that I can focus on this other work, right? So it's a decision to move or do.
Mm-hmm.
All 4 of these factors create movement, creates momentum for you. And when you really know how to get deep into all 4 of these and constantly feed them, you'll have momentum. You'll have energy.
Mm-hmm.
Leaders have to have it. They have to have that vision. They have to understand what we want, why we want it. They have to be able to get tapped into the dark side and figure out the threats and what's going on and what do I need to, get deep into that energy. And they have to make decisions, period. That creates movement.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
mastery side is a whole nother discussion.
Yeah.
You want me to get into that too?
Yeah.
Or you
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. Yeah. You lead the interview because I'm enjoying this. So
feel like whenever I do this, it feels like we're doing a little mini master class. It's like, let's go.
yeah.
But there's a lot to it. It's actually quite simple, but it's not easy to implement. That's why we do so many programs and things I do, is because people have to get into it and immerse themselves enough to start seeing the changes necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Mastery has 5 levels. There's a mindset and mechanics to all of them. You can get all that in the book, but I'll just give you the blocks for now. First one is purpose.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have a commitment to an outcome, you're not going to have a purpose. What's the purpose of what we're doing here? What is the outcome we're after, right? And commitment to that outcome. Purpose is number one. If the leader doesn't have that, we're going to struggle.
Mm-hmm.
The truth is that will then allow us to step into priorities.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of leaders right now struggle with this one a lot. When you're focused on the plan, right? You're focused on standards. There is so much stimulus coming at us. We live in a very stimulus-rich environment.
Mm-hmm.
Leaders are struggling with clarifying their priorities. Well, if you don't have a purpose, you're going to struggle with priorities.
Yeah.
If you get the priorities under control, which, by the way, if everything is a priority in your world, that means you have no priorities. I'll just go ahead. Like I need to say it because there's somebody out there going, "Oh, but I got all these important things." Well, then none of it's a priority,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
When you get your priorities going, and you got to focus on a plan, you're then going to be able to you're going to need to step into your power.
Yeah.
If you haven't noticed, everything I do is alliterated. That comes from the Bible college thing. That's residue from Bible college. So, but you got to step into your power. And that's really a conversation around accountability for your resources, right? So now I got a plan, I'm focused on it, I got my priorities, but there's some things I need to get into my life, or in my business. There's some things I need to get out of my business, right? This is a conversation around, time, money, energy, people, technology. There's all these different tools and resources that are available to us.
Mm-hmm.
Some we need to get out of our life, some we need to get in. We have a whole thing we call a resource assessment, where we do where we basically plan for them. We purge things out. We do different things. But at the end of the day, you're never going to get into the next step until you actually step into your power. Mm-hmm. Well, once you've stepped into your power, then you can work on your performance. Top leaders are going to perform. They're going to do their thing. And that really just comes from a strong sense of belief in their systems or their habits. Depends on whether we're talking about a personal situation or a business situation, right? Mm-hmm. Business is systems. Personal is habits. What a habit is to an individual, a system is to a business. So if I believe in my systems, I'm going to be able to perform at a much better rate, right? This is where confidence usually shows up. If we don't have a belief in our program or our system or things that we're doing, we're not going to be able to perform at a high level. Yeah. So we get that under control, we can then finally make progress. And the way we make progress is through flexibility in the feedback. So progress is going to happen when we start optimizing on the top end of this whole thing, always working on it, making it better. So if I went this in reverse real fast, everybody's wanting progress. Give me the progress, Spencer. No problem. Tell me about your performance. Well, I'm struggling with, I'm not doing this and that. Okay, well, do you own your resources? Meaning, are you stepped into your power? Or are you a victim here, giving it to everybody else? Well, I mean, but you don't understand. I got all these things going on. Well, then what are your priorities? Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's just so much. Well, what are we really doing here? What's the purpose? Mm-hmm. Commitment to an outcome. It's a simplistic way to really diagnose the situation and then begin to work on what's needed instead of trying to shotgun everything. Yeah, yeah. A very long answer to a very short question.
Oh, no, I like it. Thank you. Thank you. Let's focus on feedback for a little bit, which you mentioned. I don't think anybody likes feedback. Most people do. People who are built up for it. I think all of us are, but we're not willing to hear what other people have to say, enable for us to do better and be better.
Here's something we say in the book. Champions value feedback or the truth. Champions value truth. Victims are looking for validation.
Mm. Oh, I love that.
What most of us think when we say oh, I'd love to have your feedback. We don't want feedback. We just want validation that what we did is the right thing.
Yeah.
Rather than have somebody tell you this is what they think, this is what, and whether it's we're
Mhm.
seeking a champion is going to seek truth. I want to know the actual information here. And then it's my job as the leader to confirm or, vet this conversation as to how much truth is in it. If there's any truth that's going to, in fact, impede or help grow my business, right? Make progress, then I'm going to implement I'm going to act. If it doesn't get me any closer to it, because maybe that truth might be truthful, but it's not actually getting me closer to my outcome, well, then it's just irrelevant information.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Yeah. How important is it to continue to work as teams? Because all of us are so unique and different. We have different ideas. Unfortunately, we don't always blend it together to co-create what we need to.
So this is true on a large scale, and it's also true on a smaller scale, right?
Mhm.
Much of what we talk about is congruence in the book. In let's just use a couple as an example, okay?
Mhm.
I don't know how many times I've had conversations with two people, married or just together. Most of the time, the issue is that they do not have a common denominator and or goal outcome that they're after down the road. And when you don't have that, well, that's going to clearly it's going to mess up with the priorities discussion we just talked about.
Yeah.
And so what do we have to do is make sure that we have one clearly defined. How do we know when we're winning?
Mm.
It's a good way to ask the question, right? So if you have a team and there's 15 people on that team, how does that agency or that company, how does that sales team know when they are all collectively winning?
Mhm.
Right. And when we know that, then we can begin to create priorities. So if there's different sections in the team, for instance, there's a fulfillment team, right? There's a customer service team, there's a sales team. Now we create different priorities based off of that that group outcome. But without that vision, and there's two pieces of that. You got to have the vision, but you also have to be able to communicate it and enroll people into it. Without it, they're going to struggle with having one common direction of focus.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. During the pandemic, what did you notice in leadership and how people work together?
So I had a very unique experience. Everybody had a unique experience, right?
I've had many.
Yeah. Um, so this ties in with what I was just talking about, having a common goal, right?
Mhm.
My wife and I do a planning retreat every year, usually in the fall. We just did it 2 weeks ago, as a matter of fact, to
Mhm.
plan out our next year. And in 2015, we decided we were going to move from South Carolina away. And we decided on Jacksonville, Florida over those 5 years. And then we eventually, in 2020, I was determined to move to Florida because that was the plan. And
Mhm.
I didn't have anything lined up with what I was currently doing. So I took a job for the first time in forever in Florida. Now, this was before the pandemic hit. This was February, end of February. And I took a sales job at a car dealership. Well, that didn't work out in 3 weeks because the guy that hired me got fired. And then the guy over him was like, I don't know who you are and you have no experience. I'm like, but
Mhm.
frankly, you don't know me, right? But anyway, I immediately went and got a job as an RV representative, like selling RVs.
Mhm.
And during that time, I literally, the first week I was hired, everything started shutting down. The leadership there, I have to give my hats off to a young man named Caleb Ross. He's the guy that hired me.
Mhm.
General manager there, young. When I say young, I think he was 28, might have been 30 at the oldest,
Yeah.
and smart enough to know how to get things, how to shift and take advantage of the situation, which is what we did. And I went on that year, by the way, with his guidance and others to, I was the number one salesperson in 7 locations. And then I got moved into finance, which is not something normally happens in those dealerships, in 9 months. But that first month I was there,
Mhm.
I tied the top salesperson, not because I knew anything about RVs. I didn't know crap about them. I really didn't. I really didn't. But because of the leadership there, and because I was super hungry, and everybody was freaked out in the moment because they didn't know what was going on. Everything was shutting down. And what are we going to do? I didn't see it that way. I saw it as this is an opportunity. And so I went in and I tied the top salesperson that first month, because I just straight out hustled them while everybody else was freaked out. But the leadership there was very strong, and that's the experience I got for 2 years until I came out of that and started coaching for a large real estate team, and
Mhm.
then now also doing what I do now.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Let's talk about millennials in leadership. I'm a millennial. I think there's different generations. I know Gen X and blah blah blah. You know, we get underestimated, but we're full of ideas. We do stupid stuff, but it's good stupid stuff sometimes. And I think we need more chances. Someone who's been there has to teach us and
Hmm.
also listen to what we have to offer. What are your thoughts?
So let's go ahead and get this out in the open. I am actually I'm part of the Gen X. Okay.
Okay.
Um, and 2 of my daughters are millennials technically, and
Hmm.
one of them is Gen Z. Okay. So first of all, I don't think anybody makes chances for someone. I think you make your own chances.
Mm, yeah.
We also, when we're talking about in the workplace, the belief that needs to get fostered in every generation. I know plenty of lazy ass Gen X's too. Um, the belief that has to be adopted is understanding I get paid in direct proportion to the value that I bring to the marketplace.
Mm,
That's it. I think too often, and young people are getting they're married too much to who they are with what they do.
mm,
Because, well, I mean, it's not hard to see that influencers are getting paid big bucks for just being who they are, right? But that's not what they're getting paid for. They're getting paid for the attention,
mm,
not for who they are. They're getting paid for the attention,
mhm,
right? So if you understand that principle, then you can engineer this in a way to understand how I bring value to the world doesn't necessarily mean I am a valuable or invaluable person,
mhm,
right? If I make $100,000 or I make $200,000 a year, doesn't mean I'm a $200,000 person and that's all I'm worth as a person. No,
mhm,
that just means that's the value you've brought to the marketplace. And I think this is going to be a conversation that's going to be way more necessary when the economy and things begin to get even harder or more difficult. And I think this is a personal, I'm not a guru in this realm, but I believe that we're going to see challenges in the labor market, right? Businesses are not going to be able to keep affording certain people. So they're going to start cutting people out so that they can pay the ones they do have a little bit more to keep them.
mhm,
So if you're going to stick around, you need to elevate your value by increasing your skill sets, and not just hard skill sets, soft skill sets, things like mindset, right?
mhm, mhm. Yeah, I think things are already hard. Groceries is so expensive. Everything is so expensive. I remember it was in the news. It still is on and off, how much grocery is and I'm a single mom. The struggle is real. I feel the burn and
Mm-hmm.
it sucks. It
Yes,
does.
it does. Yeah, and that's the inflation issue. But what I'm saying, I think it's going to get worse from the standpoint, not from the inflation standpoint. I don't know what that's going to do. I'm referring to the fact that most businesses aren't going to be able to afford people. And so people are going to start losing their jobs. which means they're going to start losing their housing, and then they're going to start, right? And the ones that are going to come out on top. And by the way, this is not anything new.
Yeah.
Read history. Things happen, right?
Mhm.
The champion is going to look at that. I'll put it this way. We say this quite often. Victims are defined by their circumstance. Champions define their circumstance.
Mhm.
Right? Circumstances are defined by the champion. Victims are defined by the circumstance.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right? So whatever the hardship, the situation, whatever, you take ownership of that. Is the minute you take ownership of it is the minute you empower yourself to be able to do something about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I agree. Definitely agree. Let's talk a little bit more about resilience. You know, when we feel the burn, when there are so many setbacks, because on the journey from as a millennial, what I found is that not everyone's gonna be on the same train going on the same direction. There will be setbacks from even us, right? How can we continue to thrive and try to continue to go in the right direction when we feel those setbacks and burnouts? How can we do that?
So to me, that's a conversation around that. Remember the four parts of the energy,
Yeah,
right? The
yeah,
battery.
yeah.
If you don't maintain some sort of dream, you're gonna struggle already because you're always going to be in a perpetual state of frustration,
Mhm.
negativity. If you're always disturbed and trying to make decisions based off what's going on,
Mhm.
you're gonna take your hands off the wheel. If you are always aspirational and you're always thinking about dreams and desires and you're up here on this,
Yeah.
you're never going to get emotionally disturbed enough to actually make a move or do anything. So if what we're looking for is resilience,
Hmm.
it's basically the ability to keep moving forward regardless of the circumstance.
Yeah.
And I think we need to remember that continuing to move forward is a lifelong conversation.
Mm, yeah.
So it's not a discussion of my entire life is destroyed right now. It's
Mhm.
this particular season I'm in.
Mhm.
What do I need to do to keep moving forward? Sometimes it's just getting out of bed for some people
Yeah.
because there's a physical ailment, right?
Mhm.
And other people, it's way more than getting out of bed. They have the potential to do way more with themselves and they need to go do that. They should go do that. They must go do that,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
The resilience factor is essentially the ability to bend but never break.
Mm.
That's the true sign of of strength, by the way. How much does it take to break you? Mentally, emotionally, and physically.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. And I think in the break we can find purpose. Sometimes some of us need to be broken.
I got 2 plates and 12 screws in that arm.
Oh, wow. There's a
Right?
story to that. Tell us.
Absolutely. I had a seizure while driving and went across 2 lanes of traffic and hit a telephone pole head on at an estimated 50 miles an hour.
Wow.
So talk about that in the book too. Um, in the broken things, it's the meaning that you give it that you have power over.
Ooh, I love that. Yeah.
So for me, right, in a moment like that, God spared me. It was October the 1st of 2001, which means I'm coming up on the 23rd anniversary. Um, that's an opportunity for me to go do the things I need to go do. It could just as easily been that God punished me that day and put me in gave me a seizure and whatever. And no, I could choose that meaning, and whatever meaning I chose to give it, the story I choose to tell, is in fact the emotion that's going to get created from it, and whether or not I'm going to be able to move forward or not.
Hmm.
So it's one of the core things. I have a whole 4-day program called Core, and one of the one of the first two topics we talk about is control. And one of the things you have control over is, in fact, meaning, what things mean to you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I definitely agree. Yeah. Is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you'd like to share with us?
Not particularly. I would just say that if anybody wants to really stay connected to me, or they, get the book, would be the first thing I would tell you. Go get momentumandmastery.com.
Mhm.
Um, and then if you like daily texts from me, Monday through Friday, I send a text to everybody. You can get that at spencercombs.com/text. Shameless plug,
Okay.
because I believe it's good stuff.
What are your texts about? Just empowering
Um,
texts?
yeah, there. So like um, today was a quote from Denzel Washington. I said, dreams without goals are just dreams, and ultimately they fuel disappointment. Without consistency, you'll never finish. And then I said, I put this quote right at the beginning of part 3 in Momentum and Mastery. It's there as a reminder that you can have all the momentum you want, but without mastery, you're bound for a roller coaster of a life. And then I said,
Hmm.
what will you be working to master through consistency today?
Hmm.
Right. Some days it's like that. Other days it's the path towards success involves just as much or more subtraction as addition. Stay active at removing the parts of your life that are irrelevant towards your goals.
Hmm.
Here's a fun one. This is
Yeah.
one I sent out
Mhm.
Wednesday last week. Let others contemplate on the rhetoric while you concentrate on results. That was from that's from the book too. But
Wow.
anyway, yeah.
Wow. That's awesome. That's like a an amazing concussion to start the day with. Wow. If
Yeah.
I see that in the morning, I'm like, all right, there's no reason to think about what happened yesterday. Just look ahead. That's awesome. Yeah.
Life is always, we need these reminders. We got to have them. It's just because there's so much stimulus, we need to override the noise, if you will. So I can't, we can't always quiet out everything. So sometimes you can't just drop a thought. You're going to have to replace it. So it helps when we get information and stay on top of it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. So, Spencer, what do you want my audience or even people you're working with who's going to see this episode? What do you want them to get out of everything we just shared, everything you shared?
I had a young man call me years ago, who, by the way, now is doing rather well. He went on to become a big time coach for a real estate company.
Mhm.
And then now he's got his own real estate team. But during the low of his life, in the middle of a divorce, having to move into his mom's basement, right?
Mhm.
Calls me out of nowhere and he asked me a very specific question. He says, Spencer, by the way, he didn't know me. I didn't know him. He literally just found me on Facebook, which, by the way, this is in Facebook's infancy, early years.
Mhm.
He found me. I got his phone number, called him. He said, I have a question. Do you really believe that anyone could be successful?
Mhm.
Now, lucky for me, I had enough congruence in my life in the moment to answer with a very assured yes.
Mhm.
If there's anything that I think people need to get, it's not that something you're fundamentally flawed or broken. You're just using ineffective strategies. And if you're can't get it figured out because you're frustrated, you're burned out, you're stagnant, or you're just impatient, then all you need is the right framework to help diagnose the situation and then put energy where it needs to be.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. How can people find the right framework? Because not everyone's gonna have the proper resources. We have to keep looking until we find what's right for us. Even at times when we find it, we don't know that it's right. Yes, your book.
I wrote the book. It's
Yeah.
a, I don't mean to make it sound that simple, but it's truth. That's what I'm trying to tell you is the frameworks that are
Yeah.
here are they're designed to help you diagnose, clarify, and then put energy on the things that are weak in the framework. I could give you how-to systems all day long, but unless you actually plug it into a framework that you bring your raw resources to,
Mhm.
your history, your lifespan, your skills, the things that you know, and in the life that you, that's why I wrote frameworks, not how-to books.
Yeah.
It's because that's what you need. That's what people need nowadays. They don't need another how-to. You can go to YouTube and get that all day.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah. Are you also on Facebook? What other social media
Yes.
platforms are you on?
Yeah. Now I am on Facebook. I'm on all of them. You can actually go to spencercombs.com
Okay.
/social, I think it is, and all of them there. All of it is there. I am on Facebook. I'm on YouTube. So you look up Spencer Combs, Momentum and Mastery Coach. You'll see it there.
Mhm.
Um, but unshakeablegroup.com is my Facebook group. So when you go there, it'll bring you in there every Tuesday evening. So like tonight, I will go live in the group,
Mhm.
and it's Spencer Uncensored. So there's no telling, I might drop an F-bomb or two, but people think it's funny because they're like, oh, the cussing preacher. They think it's funny. But yeah,
Just be prepared.
yeah, it's not always like that, but if you got little kids in the car, you might want to be careful if that's when you're watching.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. We need those. We need those, right?
If it's appropriate. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I have one last question for you. What is the meaning of life for you, Spencer?
Growth and contribution.
Hmm, I love that. I love that. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Is there anything else you want to add as I wrap up this amazing?
I feel like I've covered probably
You
too
did.
much ground at this point. Everybody's like, oh, that's a lot of information.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, Spencer, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for all you do, and thank you for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you for allowing me to be here, Bernadette. It's exciting.
Come back again.
Oh,
Yeah, thank you.
just need the invite.